On today's episode of Spirits and Stories, we welcome a man whose life has been anything but ordinary. Julian Raven is a British-born, Spain-raised American artist, author, and man of deep conviction. A husband, father, and storyteller whose journey has taken him from missionary work to the Supreme Court. He's a builder, preacher, a sculptor, and a fighter, not just in the legal sense, but in the spiritual and personal battles that shape a life. When his painting of Donald Trump was rejected by the Smithsonian, Julian didn't just walk away, he stood up and kept standing. For nearly a decade in one of the most remarkable First Amendment journeys you'll ever hear. But today isn't just about politics or courtrooms, it's about calling, courage, and what drives a man to speak up when the world tells him to stay quiet. This is Julian Raven's story, and I'm honored to share it with you. Hey, how's it going? I appreciate you coming on. Why don't we go ahead and start with giving everybody kind of a background, because you were born in London and in Spain, and you currently live in the United States. So you've got a whole lot of area of life experiences to pull from.
I do. Firstly, Donald, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for that introduction and a well-researched one. That's wonderful, sort of summation of my journey. And I'm excited to see what that intro will pull out of us to have a great conversation. So it's great to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it. I went and looked at that painting that you did, and I know we'll get into it in a little bit, but for all the listeners out there, wow, that was amazing. I don't even know why there was any argument of accepting that. It should have been like they should have paid you to accept it.
Well, you know what we're dealing with and what we're up against.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the little guy, like the tiny guy right down on the small little edge of the whole story, dealing with the same systemic poison, sadly, that has infected, this great nation. Yep. Yeah.
Well, why don't we give everybody a quick background? What brought you to the United States? We'll kind of jump up from there.
Well, it's destiny. I mean, little background there. Born in London at the age of 2, my parents moved to sunny southern Spain. My father was an entrepreneur, and they'd driven by there on a vacation. It was so beautiful back then in the early 70s, 1972. So beautiful, so pristine, and just natural. It's just very beautiful. They were in Portugal, so the whole of the Mediterranean peninsula was beautiful. They saw Marbella and they were like, "Wow, we love this. Let's live there." And he was like, the fax machine had just been invented, and he's like, I think I can run my business from the golf course, drink gin and tonics, and send faxes. And that's how he sort of pioneered this long distance business with the fax machine way back when. So we ended up in beautiful, sunny southern Spain. I was 2 years old and had a very blessed childhood growing up there because it was so, in a sense, sparse. Went to English speaking schools, but there were very few people in the schools. The first school was like 4 people and then, 50 and very small populations. So it's a beautiful way to grow up. Bilingual, bicultural in that sense. Spanish culture is beautiful. Food, the people, they're beautiful people. The culture, the ambience, the wine, everything. Spain is beautiful. Different though from the United States with the problems that it has, and that we can get into later. And then destiny would have it that after my journey of faith, I wouldn't say begun as a young man. My father died when I was 10 years old. We were living in Portugal at the time. We'd moved there. He had gone back to England to basically try, because of business. He was like, I think Hong Kong would be a better place to do business. And being an entrepreneur, he was trying to get to Hong Kong, and sadly, he passed away in England. And my family and I, my mother, my 2 brothers, we were in Portugal. And so we were sort of there and ended up moving back to Spain and then growing up. But the wound of losing my father, whom no one really could explain it, there was very little faith in my family. On my father's side, I was Jewish. My mother's Gentile. I had a very religious, nominal, if anything, on my mother's side. My father, nothing. There was just basic, traditions. And I had nothing. So when my dad died, I didn't have anything to fall back on. And I just went off the deep end. I went into hardcore, just anger and confusion and bitterness. And where's my dad? And just no one can give me answers. And no one, where's God? And what God? And no God. And at the age of 10, I became an atheist. I didn't even know if I had faith before then, but I just concluded my mind is wired in such a way that when things in my little brain that sort of don't add up, then I came to the conclusion with my very limited that God doesn't exist. And so I didn't just become an atheist. I became a bitter, wounded young boy who went through life very hurt because of this trauma and was unable to find, answers. And I went looking on the search to find a replacement, a father. It was losing a dad, your listeners, it's not a unique story. A lot of people lose a parent, sometimes both, and it's a real trauma. And my story was basically at the age of 18, I had another very powerful, life-changing experience in southern Spain. I was, this is really quite interesting, where my mother, wonderful woman, she was a widow, always loving her sons, her three very mischievous young boys without a father living in southern Spain. You just did whatever you wanted to. And we did. Christmas Eve, 1988, she says to me, she called us up. Very English. My mother was spoke like the Queen's English. She was very, 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 very particular, very, very English. I have like a very neutral accent. It's very Americanized now, but growing up in Spain, it was very neutral. But my mother was very particular. And, but she says to us, Christmas Eve, 1988, she says, I'm going to go to church. She never went to church, but once a year, she'd go to a Catholic mass, midnight mass. Christmas Eve, and she says to us, and we've been out drinking. I mean, we were hard partiers. It was 6, 7 in the afternoon. We were already drinking. She's like, would you come? We're like, sure, Mom, we'll come with you. So it's Mom by herself, So we turn out with a bunch of girls. It's midnight. And again, we're just doing what we do. We get into this church, a Spanish church. It's like, 400 or 500 Spanish people. It's packed solid. Christmas Eve is a big deal in Spain.
Yeah.
Well, Spain, hardcore celebritants of great, they are party. That's whether it's religious festivals or whatever, any excuse to do, they do it hardcore. So it's full of people, and we're a group of like English folk, and the priest comes up in Spanish, and he comes up and he's like, I need somebody to read from the Bible in English. And for some reason, family, even my brothers, they turned to me and they're like, my nickname's Jules. They're like, Jules, you do it like this. And they laughed. And they said, the priest sort of put his hand on my shoulder and slapped the Bible in my hand. I didn't know what to do. We were not sober. I'm telling you now, we were not. So I'm sitting there. We were sitting in the pews and everyone's singing their Catholic Spanish Christmas, carols. And the brothers and I, we're laughing. They're laughing at me. They're like, you're going to, this is it. And then before long, a strange thing happened where like a reverence for the whole scenario came over me, and I went quiet and I began to sober up, and I suddenly became very serious, very somber. They were laughing. I was now, before long, they called me up, and, and the good part was I was dressed well that night. I had a suit and tie on, so at least I looked good.
Yeah.
I got up there and I read from the Bible, and, that's it. And I can't even remember. It's like John, a passage in John. And so, but that night, Donald, we went out to the bars, and we were in a bar. We used to help the guy out. He'd give us drinks. We'd serve behind the bar. We're there. In Spain, the bars run till like midnight till 6 a.m. And then you go to the discotheques after 6 a.m. That's when you go until like the next day. It was ridiculous. So it's 6 a.m. We're cleaning up this bar. And actually before that happened, during the night, there was a big fight in this bar. And all these people were like just piling on inside the bar. It's like going crazy. The police came. There were people that I knew that were involved, and I was like, well, I'm just behind the bar. Had nothing to do with me. But one of the guys fighting, Spanish guy, he's at the bar and he's drunk. He's sitting there and he's like, give me something to wipe my face. And he's all sweating. And I started mocking him. I'm like, say, what an idiot. It's Christmas Eve, man. Do you have to behave like this? I mean, we just, do you have to, so he got offended. He punches me, just whacks me right over there. I immediately punch him right back, knock him off his stool. The police grab him because they're still there. They grab this guy, they drag him off, they arrest him. And I'm cleaning, doing the bar thing. And that went on all night. And so at 6 a.m, though, the police return. We're clean. There's no one around. There's myself, my brother, the owner of the bar, a few girls, and we're mopping up, ready to go on to the discotheques. And the police, they drive around this little port. They come in, no one around. Everyone's gone. And they get out. There's 3 of them. In Spain, it's a very corrupt place. It's not as corrupt as South America, Spain is a very corrupt place, and like, there's corruption everywhere you go, but Spain, particularly in this sense, in law enforcement, you didn't want anything to do with them. As a foreigner, you wanted to be a long way away from them. And they came in, they looked at me, and they were like, you, come here. And I was like, what'd I do? And they take me out to the car, and I'm thinking the guy that I punched, like, pressed charges or something. And I'm standing there. My brother's like way off in the distance looking. Three of them, they got me. And suddenly out of nowhere, they start beating me. And I was stunned. I'm like, what in the world? I call out to my brother, you better run and get my passport, because back then, you could end up floating in on the sea, the next to me. Seriously. I mean, it was that bad. You didn't know what was going to happen to you. And so they piled me in this car. They're beating me in this car. They're beat. I mean, I was just, and then they got me to the police station, like a 1,000-year-old castle in Spain. It's an ancient place. And I can remember walking down like a corridor in this dungeon. It was underground virtually. And the echoes of the nightsticks bouncing off my back. It's like I could still hear it today. And so I had this wild experience. I didn't do anything. So in my mind, again, the way that I'm wired, I'm like, well, I didn't do it. What in the world? I thought I was losing my mind. I was like, I didn't do a thing. What in the world? Those guys, they dropped me off and they went off. They didn't file any paperwork. They left me in the corner. Again, in Spain, it's like bankrupt. By 9 a.m, my brother turns up with the passport, and they basically picked me up and they tossed me onto the street. They like grabbed me and just threw me out. There's no process, no paperwork. You got beat up that night. Who cares? I mean, that's what it's like. I mean, that's a small picture of what. So me being now an atheist, already lost, angry young man, I wake up midday after 3 hours of sleep on some girl's couch, and I wake up and I can remember I was seething. I was like, there is no God. Oh God. And so what had happened in my brain was that, here once in my life, I did something religious. I went to a church. I read from a Bible. And then this happens to me. I already said there was an atheist, and I was an atheist. There was no God. Now I was enraged. I was like, and it's for the age of 18 to 22, I was on a death spiral. I owned 3 hard rock bars. I could drink as much as I wanted to. Dry. I did the whole crazy lifestyle. But God showed up on a mountain one day when I was meditating on nature. I won't get into those details. There's a lot to the story, Donald. But I had a tremendous encounter and a conversion experience that then led me as a truth seeker. I find God on this mountain. My life is changed. I walk away from the lifestyle, the drugs and the alcohol, leave it all behind, and I go walkabout, and I end up in California. And California, I was going to go to Mexico, fluent in Spanish. I was going to go and preach the gospel there. But I ended up, God changed my plans. And, I love the old sort of story that goes, or the anecdote, you can, if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. So my plan was to go to Mexico, and God's plan was different. I ended up in New York, where I am now. And that's how I came to America. I didn't want to come and stay in America. I was prejudiced against America. This is what's very interesting about Europe. Having been brought up there, there is a very strong anti-American sentiment in European press, in the media, in entertainment. England, Spain, the whole thing. In Spain, they have American military bases you're probably familiar with, in Rota, Cadiz, and in Madrid. There are 2 military bases. Spain's had America's had an amazing influence on Spain. Their constitution from 1975 is like a carbon copy of the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, except they left the whole monarchy bit in, which is quite funny. They got kings and queens and then their constitution, but it's very similar to the American Constitution. So they are really birthed out of American ideas. They love America. They love America. All the American things, everything, culture. And, I grew up on that in Spain. But America as a nation, they were like, fuera Yankees, get out of here, Yankees. And this is a sort of sentiment that I had. I had a prejudice that had been culturally absorbed. Even right. The Brits were always mocking America. So that then led me to, it was really strong. But this is the amazing part, Donald, that the American people that I would meet in Spain, students, travelers, backpackers, military people. We lived across the street one time, and there was I don't know what rank he was, but he was from the Rota base. I think he was retired, him and his wife. We were neighbors. I have been impacted by Americans and American families growing up in Spain. Everyone that I met gave me something and impacted my life. They were always larger than life. They were generous. They were interesting. They were skilled. So that experience with Americans kept challenging this notion that was being poured into you by culture. The American people, they're amazing. They were wonderful. My art teacher at school, that was one of my mentors that impacted me most in my life as an artist, but as a young man, he was from California, another American. So all of this was challenging this sort of cultural input that you're getting. And so when I came to the US, I wasn't planning on staying. I was going to go to Mexico. But the more that I stayed, and as God led me, the more I fell in love with America. And I began to understand what America was and learn about America and learn about the history and the laws. I fell mad in love with America. I mean, I was like, what I was poisoned with is so untrue once you get here and actually find out what America is all about.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So when I was deployed to Bosnia with some British troop, and they love us. Not so much.
It's a strange thing. Strange. They love, but they have to be this. It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it is. So you said an art teacher was a big influence. Did you know before then that you had the creative ability to be an artist?
Since I was very young. Yep. I can remember sitting on my father's knee, maybe 7, 8 years old, and sketching and drawing with him. And so my grandfather on my mother's side, he was an engineer, but he was a painter, and he didn't live as a painter. He would go to work all day as an engineer. He'd come home and go to art school at night. So he was a lover of art history. He went to painting classes. Funny story was he would carry around, not that he was painting live nudes, but he was painting nude busts. Like the art school would have these nude busts for him to paint. And in those days, this is probably the 40s and 50s in England, very sort of conservative England like that. He'd be carting around these big canvases my mum said on the bus, the double-decker bus of these nude women on his. It was a classic picture. The guy was just, he loved what he did. He loved beautiful things, and that's what he did. So, that was my background. So that's in me. But David Bodlack, who's the artist's name, who passed probably like 7, 8 years ago, he was a major impact on my life, and as an American, and a wonderful, wonderful impact, making me then, a lot of who I am today was imparted to me by him in the arts, especially.
Can you tell us a little bit about your art studio in Elmira and how Mark Twain's hometown influenced you?
Well, I'm in my studio now. It's upstate New York has fabulous property prices. So I could afford this whopping great studio. It's enormous, and it's very affordable for me. And I was able to then use it, and I've had it now for 10 years. And this is the location where I paint the painting that we will get to. But and then obviously, Elmira being the home of Mark Twain, which few people know, the best reference about this city, which is a beautiful city, but again, upstate New York, very depressed. So economically, it's very flat. It's sort of it's like a ghost town many times. There's like no one around. You go out and there's just a few cars. It's very quiet, like that. The whole of upstate New York is like that. And yet the bones of the city, beautiful buildings and just a great history. And then obviously in the 40s and 50s, Mark Twain lived here, and he was, not just the only one. This city was the destination for all of the elites of New York City that come to Elmira. And, in the movie, It's a Wonderful Life, the next time you watch it, or you might remember it, right? I think it's the beginning, first quarter of the movie. There's a scene in a bar with all these people, and there's this one person. He's like, "I'm going to Elmira," and it's like a mention in that film that at that time when that movie came out, Elmira was this destination. So it's a beautiful town, very quiet but very affordable, and it was the birthplace of a life-transforming painting that I was to paint.
Yeah, that's the only area that I would deliver to. When I owned a trucking company when I first got out of the military, and upstate New York, if it was southeast of Buffalo, I didn't go.
That's exactly where I am.
Anything north of that, the people are completely different. So if my listeners have never been there, a lot of people have the impression that all of New York is like New York City. And the truth is that a lot of people that live in the rural parts of New York would like to see New York City leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, they're not fans. I know
You know exactly that. That's a big truth. When I discovered that, I was very, very surprised.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, New York and New York State are like two different entities. Well, they are not like, they are two different worlds.
Yeah, I would agree. The people up there are so much nicer. I never had any issues when I delivered up north, and I just stayed away from anywhere within 100 miles of New York City. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what inspired you to even paint a picture of Trump?
I knew the Trump story from, I think, The Apprentice, and then we lived near New York City before I moved to Elmira. I lived in a town just north of Manhattan called, what was it called? I don't even remember the name. It just slipped my mind. I remember in a second. Nyack is called. So New York, small little river town. I had a business there. I was there for 10 years. That's where I met my wife. That's where I got married. That's where we had our first, I think, all 3 children there. And so I had a business. It was a creative business, designing and building furniture. So as my artistic gift was trying to find expression in that way, I used to hand paint furniture and that type of thing. But Trump was a big feature in the culture, conversations. When I made deliveries to New York City, you saw Trump this, Trump that. You know, one of the remarkable stories of coming to America, which maybe for another time, when I was with my mother, my dear mother who passed at the end of 2023, was we went to New York City my first time and had this amazing experience take place there. But that time we went, she was like, "Oh, we need to go to Trump Tower and have a coffee." So we went. So it was, his name is you learn it, you find out who this guy is, and the TV show. But when I was in upstate New York and I was living here in Elmira, 2014. Trump started showing interest in running for governor, and living in New York and with the political chaos that there is and the sort of duality of what's really good. It's such a strange setup the way it is. Myself and people that I knew were like, wow, this could be really good. We're a businessman, New York needs something. We can't deal with this constant dynasty of governors that we've had up here. So I was already supporting him. He did an exploratory campaign. He didn't get farther than the Republican committee to thumb their noses at him because of his background or his support of the Democrats before, and he didn't get the support, so he walked away. That was 2014. So a year later, there's June 15th, 2015. I think it was June 16th when he comes down the escalator, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. And, I'm watching, and the process between that day and what I went through, I have these few experiences in my life of real inspiration, but also just touching a vein of existence that's so profound for me as an artist. I knew the story, for example, Shepard Fairey. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Obama Hope poster that became this iconic image. This is one artist, and I knew about this, and I'm like, I'm an artist, hey, this, I could paint a painting of Trump, maybe it could be good for my career. Then I'm like, maybe it won't be good for my career. And so I was in this sort of thing. And one day I'm sitting down, I'm listening to him speak at my computer, and he's giving his pitch at the time. And a lot of it, I was like, yeah, it's exactly what we're dealing with. It's straight up. And in my mind, I see a picture of an American flag on like a flagpole falling to the ground, and this eagle coming down and swooping in and snatching it right before it touches the ground. And it was sort of symbolic in my mind of this was a saving act, that the America's falling. How it is for the flag and not to touch the ground, and all this sort of symbolism in that. And right before it's snatched and it's pulled up. And I'm like, that's cool. And as I'm looking, I wasn't watching him actually, it was just audio. I then it's in my mind was like a ticker tape across my mind of words. It was unafraid and unashamed. And I was like, cool, that's cool. That's good. And then nothing, because I began to consider painting a portrait, and that consideration lasted probably like 4 or 5 weeks, because that was probably June 15th. And in June 15th, then you had a delay of maybe 6 weeks, right to the beginning of August. So all the rest of June and then July. And a lot of the reason for my delay as I meditated on what I might paint or how I might paint it was because I realized that if I do this, it's going to mark my artistic career and journey in such a way that may not be positive. It may be very negative, because he was already in the firestorm for what he was saying. And I said, if I come out and paint this now, that's going to do it. So can you give me 1 second? My dog is barking at the door. I've got to let her out. Excuse me. Because I had sort of dilly-dallied about, should I do this? Should I not? And I'm sitting down one night when I said to myself, you really need to get on with something here and take this image, this flag, this falling flag, this eagle, and, what are you going to do? And, you start in your mind, you start sort of trying to work out a composition, his face, what's it going to be? How big is it going to, And I'm sitting at my computer, and I was, at the time even, I was not even painting, I was welding, and I was working on steel sculptures. And my daughter, her name's Victoria, she was 13 at the time. She walks by my desk and looks at the screen, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, you're going to build a sculpture of an eagle for the president to be, this type of thing," she says. And I said, no. I said, "No, I'm just putting some ideas together because I'm going to make a painting." And then she says, "Oh, well, maybe make the painting of Donald Trump. And when he becomes president, he can hang it in the White House." And she didn't know anything about what I was thinking. She had no idea what I was planning for 5 weeks now, 6 weeks. Out of nowhere, she says, maybe he's going to become president, or when he becomes president. It was like a prophetic utterance. She just says this. And I stood staring at her like, wow, my daughter. And, because I was working on an eagle, and it was a sculpture of an eagle, and then it became this. So this whole conversation was really something. Yeah. So I keep working, but this is the most amazing part of the story. For me, this is the way I interpret my experience, is that the next morning, very early, like 7 a.m, there was a story on CNN, and it was about Trump, and it said, "I had a visitor this morning." That's how the lead-in was. It was a video, and I clicked play, and there's Donald Trump standing in his office in Trump Tower with a bald eagle resting on his arm. And I was like stunned. I was like, it was a very well-known shot. They had a photo shoot that morning early in time. It was Time magazine, I believe, and it was done really early, and it was put out in the media very early. And I'm there. So I've been wrestling for 6 weeks with this eagle, this man's face. My daughter says this, maybe you should paint a painting of Trump and give it to him. He can hang it in the White House, this type of thing with the eagle. And then the next morning I'm there, and I see this guy standing in his office with this bird on his arm. And I was blown away. I was like, to me, it was the highlighting of events, or the coinciding of events that said to me, this man is going to become president. At that time, there were 17 other candidates. The other the Republican stage was full. And at that time, there were all these other Democrats, like 4 other candidates, 5 Democrats. So I knew, Donald, and from that moment, I went down to my studio. I built this huge, the painting is 7 by 15 feet. It's enormous. In its frame, it's 8 by 16 feet. I built this huge frame, and I'm in the studio. It's like this similar time of year now to what we're in. It's hot in my studio. I built this frame, and I don't really know what I am going to do still. I've got this face, I've got this image and this bird, and, I hadn't developed much more than what I had done the night before, but I was now consumed, burning with this need and drive to paint this picture, because suddenly I knew this man was going to become president, with all the mockery going on. And he was a scam in the sense of he's going to do this or do that. And at that time, he might have just been doing it for publicity. He might not even have been serious or thinking that he had a chance. He was just throwing his hat in to see what happened. But all that was taking place, for me, I was like, no, this man's going to win. And I had myself away then for nearly 2 months painting this painting morning, noon, and night. That's all I did. I slept in front of the painting at night. So I would lie down and see my family like, "Oh, my Dad, are you okay?" I'd get up in the middle of the night and walk out of my room. And my wife's like, "Sweetie, where are you going?" It's like 3 a.m. Go to my studio. I was consumed with this spirit of inspiration to paint this painting. And the painting was very hard. I didn't know what at that time, and I still paint, even though I use brushes, but for the last decade, I've painted with dropping drips on the floor as a contemporary abstract painter and an impressionist painter. I'd painted this huge portrait before with drips, taking a month, just dropping drips with ketchup bottles standing up and dropping it on the floor. Very difficult, but I was like, I can't do that. It's not going to give me the detail that I need. And so then I embark on painting this huge, I never painted a portrait like that before. Yeah. Huge 7-foot face and a 9-foot eagle. And, and I wanted to make it as dramatic in my mind and as I could, and as beautiful as I could. And it's layered with symbolism. There's all sorts of the details in it. Really, and the story, when I share it and when I used to show it in that sense, it's really a testament to what I believed about America. I injected obviously a lot of my personal beliefs. The picture is that falling flag that
Yeah.
on one side is torn and faded and reversed and splitting in half. And it's got the tear of it in the shape of a baby, like all these symbols of all the chaos America is, and it's fluttering in space, like unmoored. When you look at it closely, the ropes, the lanyards that attach it to the pole, they're cut off from their anchor. It's floating. And yet the flag is like a surreal dream that is what's going on inside this man's brain. This flag changing, and it's before long it's attached like a time continuum. It's this long stretched out flag that becomes new stripes and new red and white stripes and new blue ink and new stars, and it's like this vision of make America great again. And how do you I was like, how do you paint that? And this was my interpretation of how that image would look. So I was, and it's floating. There's a lot to it that was happening as I painted it. Sort of the inspirational impulses as I painted this painting. That's what's exciting, because when you plan things, you can make it beautiful, but you don't give room for the inspiration to take. But inspiration is coming right now in real time. You're painting and it's like, absolutely, and then you're doing this, and it's not working, and you painted it, it's not working. That painting is layered with all these efforts, and where it was terrible and not working, failing, and at one point he looked like Abraham Lincoln. Then he looked like Dirty Harry. He looked like Clint Eastwood. I mean, it was really funny. And other times it looked terrible. And I'm like, oh, this is awful. And my kids would come in and they're like, oh, Dad, that looks great. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It looks terrible. And I'm trying to fix it on the canvas and I'm learning. And it was very hard.
Yeah.
But I finished it by the grace of God. So that's that chapter, life-changing, inspirational moment. And it changed my life because of what happened after that.
Yeah. So obviously, your thoughts, people are telling you, your daughter's telling you that you should give it to Trump and hang it in the White House when he wins. How did the Smithsonian Institute come about instead of it going to the White House?
After the creation and the journey that I went on, my American political pilgrimage, which was the most wonderful experience, going across country with carting this painting with me, campaigning, which I did from New York to California. I mean, I went all over the country. I had a remarkable time. And then the end of the campaign came, and it was shown right here in Elmira at the Republican dinner the night before, the 2 nights before the election. I got to share, and my story it was a wonderful thing. And then we sat up, and I'd never voted before. It was the first time I ever voted in my life. I grew up in Spain. I was not a political person. I was in a foreign country then. I didn't vote. I'd just become a citizen in 2015. So I had this, all at the time I was painting this painting. I then become a citizen in the midst of it. I'm pledging allegiance to the flag and to the Constitution. I'm in this place where it was a life-changing experience on top of what I was going through, becoming a citizen. So are you still there?
My camera's messing up.
Shall I keep the audio still good?
Yeah, the audio is still good.
So I become a citizen in September of 2015, right in the midst of this part of the journey. And so the year passes. It's now 2016, and he wins. And, I'm not that surprised.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is it was shocked a lot of people. I think if he had his choice, he would run as an independent. He just knew at the end of the day, though, he had to be on a party to stand a chance. I'm on pause. Yeah, let me fix my camera real quick. So you actually ended up campaigning. I mean, you took this massive picture and took it across the United States and ended up at the Republican dinner. I assume at some point you got the opportunity to talk to President Trump.
Yeah, I met him twice. I was an alternate delegate for New York at the Republican National Convention. The picture appeared there on screen. I mean, there was a lot of press, a lot of hostility. I couldn't believe how much hostility I was getting. The sort of contradiction in the left-wing side of the world, especially in the art world, which, as they proclaim to be so tolerant and open-minded, are not. You have to basically goose step with their ideology to be accepted. So I was just treated just like the hostility that I got was just unbelievable. I mean, it was shocking. Few people, right at the beginning, June of 2016, I was invited. This is an amazing, amazing part of the story. The patron and inspiration behind the Obama Hope painting or portrait is actually it's just a Photoshop photo from the internet, the Obama Hope portrait that became, this iconic image synonymous with his campaign win of 2008. The guy that inspired that work of art and paid the guy to do it, his name is Yossi Sergent, and a hardcore left-wing activist. But he had an art show at Politicon in California, Pasadena, California, in June of 2016. And that was one of the major journeys that I did across the country with the painting. Myself, I hauled it across. So I was invited to that art show. That's another story to that. It's all in the book, the stories, the drama, the journey, the things that happened to me. It's just like, it's like a movie. And so it's all there. So California was huge. LA was huge, but he was one of the few, I would say, hardcore leftists on the other side of the political spectrum who was open-minded enough to say, listen, yeah, I get it. I know where you're coming from. But he said, your painting's a vision of hope. And he says, I want it in my show. And he gave me the primary wall. It was the major painting in that show. It was enormous. Everything else was looked like little cartoons next to it. But it was hung with that original Obama painting. So it had the prestige of that in the art world. It was huge. This was the nation's top political artists all in this Politicon, that big political conference 2016. It was really something. And for me as an artist, it was like, wow, this is really a great opportunity. So I had a lot of these things happen, and the RNC, a lot of good things. But along the way, and the question that you asked about why the Smithsonian and not the White House, once the election happened, I was like, what now? I was like sort of pretty discouraged because I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't remember, wasn't in my mind. Trump had a copy of it hanging in Trump Tower for a year. He'd had one. I'd given them one in November of 2015, and it's been hanging there. I don't know if it's still there, but it was, that was there. So I didn't think about that, because what happened was, on the journey across the United States, most places I'd show the painting, somebody would say to me, that needs to be in the Smithsonian. I didn't even know what the Smithsonian really was. I'm a Brit here. I had heard of the Smithsonian. I'd heard of rockets and spaceships, or so,
that's what I think.
Yeah. And that's, but I would hear that needs to be in the Smithsonian. So after this lull, after the win, I didn't know what to do. I prayed. I said, God, what am I going to do with this painting? And I suddenly remembered all these people that would say it needs to be in the Smithsonian. So I start researching the Smithsonian, and bang, I find out the Smithsonian has a National Portrait Gallery. I didn't know. I researched the National Portrait Gallery. Bang, 2008, 2013, they showed the Obama Hope poster at the inauguration, with big celebrations for the inauguration of President Barack Obama. 2009, it was January, and in January the 20th, 2009, and the same January the 20th, 2013, months of celebration, multiple portraits, big portraits, but that Obama Hope. So I was like, bingo! I was like, these guys not only have the support, they show presidential political art for the inauguration of the incoming president. I was like, this is a win. I go to all the political people I'd met on my journey, the chairman of the Republican in New York State, congressmen, senators in New York State, chair people, you name it, a radio host personality, art collector. I got all these letters, multiple letters, mayor of the town, city of Elmira, council. I mean, just all these people that had witnessed this journey. They all wrote these glowing letters of support to the Smithsonian. So this was a publicly endorsed, representatives of 200,000 people up here.
Yeah.
Applications. So they were all backing me. So I made this big package and I send it off to the National Portrait Gallery director, whose name was Kim Sayet. I didn't know anything more about it than that. There's a lot more to the story, details of the actual journey to it. Again, it's in the book. You have to read it.
Yep.
But that was the big deal. I sent off this application to hang this painting as a tribute to the incoming president-elect of the United States of America, this political portrait that had campaigned across the country. It was the most recognized portrait. It was the first political painting of Trump ever. He had paintings of himself before and all that type of. This was the first political portrait painted ever. It's the first one. I painted it in the summer of 2015, I forget, before he was even, he was not even considered serious at that time.
Yeah.
And so I write the big application, send it in. And the next day, I call the Smithsonian and I speak to the secretary and I say, My name's Julian Raven. I sent you this application. I'm just following up to see if there's anything else I need to do. Anything, here's my number. I'd already given it, but, just, showing good faith, and you're ready to do anything to help this process. This is now December 1st, 2016. So we had the whole month of December and 20 days into November, like 6 weeks to get this done. Plenty of time. And I get a phone call. And I answer the phone, and it's an Australian woman. And she introduces herself. And this is Kim Sayet, the director of the National Portrait Gallery. And I was sitting down. I stood up. I'm like, man, I'm getting a call from the director of the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. I'm like, I stand up, I'm showing respect. I'm like, wow, I did not expect this. I expected the secretary just to maybe email me back or something. You know what I'm saying? Say, do this and whatever. And the conversation, 11-minute call starts. That was a life-changing phone call. With this woman, she was a seething Trump hater. And she starts objecting to my painting, saying things like she started by saying, it's too big. I said, too big? I didn't know enough of the Smithsonian to really counter that argument because I'd not been there. But they have huge paintings there. Obama had 2 huge portraits hung for his inauguration. So she was just making up from the get-go arbitrary objections. Then the next thing she says, and this is what threw the whole conversation to an argument, like a virtual screaming match with her. You wouldn't believe this. She says to me, and she's got this very snooty Australian accent. She's like, yes, it's not from life, meaning you didn't paint this directly from the subject. You didn't paint it in from life. It's like taken from something else. But I knew the Obama Hope portrait story so well, and I knew that wasn't taken from life. That was a photograph. It was a Photoshop photograph. That's it. So I counter her, and I say, no, you're wrong. This Obama portrait you took that. Mine's taken from a series of. She now starts lying. The Obama portrait was taken from life. And I was like, now I'm really shocked because I'm like, this woman now is like, and I was like, no way. I was really stunned. And her voice is getting louder. And then she shoots back. It's too pro-Trump. Too pro-Trump. I'm like, how does a portrait not be pro the subject? It's like, I didn't get, and then this is the clincher. Then it's like, it's too political. Like, too political. I'm like, what? The Obama campaign portrait that was key in helping this man win the election for his political campaign is showed, and his is not too. I mean, this is stupidity, Don.
Yeah.
This is arbitrary. This woman was just clutching for arbitrary reasons to vent, and this is how it ends. So it got really heated. And it got to a point where she then starts to mock me. And then she says, it's no good. She's like, and she says, I know how hard it is. And she knew she was relishing this, telling me and I said, have you seen the painting? And she's looking at a 4 or 5 inch picture on a screen. I said, this thing is over 100 square feet. It's 7 by 15 feet. And you're going to tell me that you have the knowledge of a painting that size by looking at a little photo of it to say that it's no good? And she was now, obviously, every time I was shooting back at her, refuting her, she's really angry. She does this at the end. She raises her voice. She says, I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery. Your application will go no further. You can appeal it all you want. Like this. That's the call.
Wow.
That's how my book starts. Yeah. Wow. And I was blown away in the sense that I felt like someone had just taken a bat to me, because when I stood up, I have great respect for authority. I believe as God ordains authority, and you show respect, you show deference, this is the, and that's the whole military can't function without the chain of command and with that's the way the world functions. And especially now you're dealing with, the National Gallery of the United States, or there is another National Gallery. This is the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. You have a posture before them of, I'm here. What can I do? But then she starts beating on me, and I'm like, whoa, hold on. And then I start to defend myself. So this woman, she like inflicted like this. It was an abuse of power.
Yeah.
Where she came out of she violated her own job description everything. She broke the law. She broke everything. And she's now, because don't forget, this is only weeks after Trump won. So you remember that first victory and the people had lost their minds.
Yeah.
And then it was as if I was a punching bag that this person who was so enraged could now call him up and just inflict some real venomous pleasure on squelching the little guy. That's what it felt like. It was horrible. So I was stunned. I was like, you got to read the book, and it's really worth the read, because the book is a journey of a lot of discouragements, a lot of disappointments, a lot of heartache, letdowns. This was like the beginning of that part where you're like, for 3 days, I couldn't speak hardly. I didn't speak to my wife. I was like, and then I finally, when I shared, she was like, what? No, she flipped out. She's like, I can't believe this. I said, I know it. And this whole thing. So then you're walking around now with this black eye.
Yeah.
And you're like, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I said, I kind of lie. And as you said in the introduction, I'm not the type of person, you're not going to come over and step on me, that if you think that you're just going to have someone just roll over, I'm going to say, excuse me, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm saying this is not going to happen. And if it has happened, I'm going to do everything possible. When she said to me that day, you can appeal it all you want, that's exactly what I did. And that started my legal battle.
Yeah.
From that day forward.
But she took this from a professional matter as a job description to a personal matter. And she started treating it like she wasn't in a position no more. It was her gallery. I own this. These are and you're not going to hang that picture in my gallery. And that's exactly what she did. She lost her professionalism. She turned it into a personal belief instead of being objective. And what do you expect is going to happen? When you turn it personal, you encourage that person, the other person, to fight back.
Yeah. I think she relished it. I think she was longing for that moment to raise her voice, say who she was, and hang up the phone,
Yeah, I completely agree. So obviously that process is a long road. I'm sure it doesn't happen overnight. So you appealed. How long did it take for them to get around to denying the appeals like she said she would do?
I then was like, well, how do I appeal this? So I then researched, well, what is the Smithsonian Institution? Who runs it? Who's the boss? I find the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents of the Smithsonian Institution is comprised of 17 members. Guess who? Chief Justice John Roberts, the Vice President of the United States, 3 members of Congress, 3 members of the Senate, 9 members of the public, like super duper successful people. So little old Julian Raven, I get at my computer and I start hammering out my appeal, and listing what happened. Because the one thing I did is I didn't record that call, which I wish I had done.
Yeah.
Because in New York State, you could have legally done it. I wasn't expecting her to call. But I wrote it down after she hung up when I was stunned condition. Within like half an hour, I was jotting down those fresh notes, what she said, like this. So I had a rough draft. I write this big long appeal, 17 copies of it, big packages, I pick prints of the picture, and I go down to the post box like this with the post office. So I start shoveling all these huge packages on the desk, sending them off one by one. All of these individuals named to each one, to this boom, 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 all went. And I'm like, okay, Kim said, here we go. Let's see what happens. Well, weeks later now, and obviously the inauguration is fast approaching. Now, that was December 1st. The time it took me to recover, to study, to find out what I was doing. This is now probably late December. I get a response a week, 2 weeks in writing from a guy by the name of Richard Curran, Dr. Richard Curran, big cheese at not a regent, an employee, who says to me, the Chief Justice has handed me over he didn't even call it appeal. And I reviewed what Kim said did, and I agree with things she said. Goodbye.
Wow.
Yeah. You should read about him in the book. You'll laugh when you read about him. I called him Concurring Curran. That's the title of the chapter. Concurring Curran. My goodness. No, it's madness. So now I asked the kick between the legs. I got the black eye.
Yeah.
Now kick between the legs. And out of the other eye that's like tearing up, you're like, okay, now where do I go? Listen, man, I am just this. I'm a simple guy. I love my family. I love God, my wife, my children. I live in the woods in Elmira. A little simple guy.
Yeah.
But this was the next thing. Just squinting, tearing eye after you got this other blow. So now I'm researching. I'm going to sue these people. I don't have the money. I'm just a simple guy living in the woods in Elmira. I don't hire lawyers and all this type of thing. How to do this? I think I wrote at one point to one of these organizations that represent people. They didn't get back to me. We'll get into this part. The Smithsonian Institution exercises a mysterious control over the hearts and minds of American people. I'm a Brit, so I don't have this. I didn't grow up here. I wasn't carted off to DC as a child and like initiated into the Smithsonian at a young age. So American people, and rightly so, the Smithsonian has been a remarkable institution of the curating of American history. There's no doubt about it. And yet it holds this sort of pseudo-sacred place in people's hearts where I've had people to my face scream at me, "How dare you sue the Smithsonian? How dare you? What are you talking? You're defending it like it's your mother." Yeah. I mean, it's that like people defend their church. Like that's the depth of, and this you'll get into the enigma in the book and this very strange experience that I begin to journey on. So, but my first step is doing the research. I'm going to sue them myself. And this was where, as a patriot, as a newborn American citizen, I fell in love with this country because of things that I read, in the Constitution and the First Amendment and free speech and freedom of religion. And I was like, I used to carry a Constitution around with me. I go preaching on the streets. I carried it around with me. So if I got hassled by the police, I was like, this, buddy, this is your law. It says it right here. I can be doing what I'm doing. So I was always excited about that. And now I was like, well, I'm going to test and see how free I am and whether this can happen in the sense of, can I sue the government? Can I sue these people? And I did. I didn't know what I was doing. I was reading and studying and then I filed my first lawsuit, but I filed it in the wrong court. I was in the wrong place. I don't know. I was like the wrong court. You couldn't file it here. It was into some other. DC has like 15 different types of federal courts, all these different courts. I filed it in the wrong court. But the great thing about it, once I realized that I had filed it in the wrong court, that judge, he said, because then you had to petition the judge or motion the judge for an order of transfer to the right court. And I got the greatest bit of after all the discouragement. It was one of the few, and even till today, one of the few glimmers of light where this one judge said, his responsibility was that he would not transfer a case if it didn't have merit. So he had to assess the case to see it have merit. And he read and he ruled. He said, having read through Mr. Raven's case, it looks like he has reasonable and claims. He said this, and this. He says, I'm transferring this case. And he orders this. And I got this letter, and it was like the first good news I had because it was some positive thing after already this heartache. And I was like, this is great. So then I get transferred into the District Court of Columbia, the District of Columbia. And that's where my case started to climb through the different courts.
Yeah. It is crazy because had this happened, I'm going to go back even 30 years. If you had painted this 30 years ago of a Republican president and sent it to the Smithsonian, I don't think you would have had any of these issues. It has been the last 10 years or so that the Democratic Party became the old Republican Party, and the old Republican Party has become the old Democrat Party. They have literally reversed. Back in the day, the Democrats was supposedly for the working man and the Republicans were for the rich. And it has like flipped roles and the people have just became insane. I think I would cry if there was ever the power to rewrite the Constitution, because if it was rewritten today, this country would collapse. The thoughts and the belief that people have
couldn't happen.
No, be insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, it had to be birthed out of a people that had a moral conscience, and that's there was no other way about it.
Yeah, you won't find that today. So you're going through the court process, and how long does this whole process of actually suing and everything take place?
Well, it's years. I started in December 2016. I have a petition, my third petition, on the desk of the justices of the Supreme Court now as we speak. I'm still at it. 8 years into this, I'm still at it. And that's part of what just happened over the last month. This is my destiny. It's my calling. I've grown and learned so much through all the hardship, God and my faith, my Christian faith, my belief. God is able to take, Romans 8:29 says that God is able to basically turn all things for good for the benefit of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. He can take your worst experiences and your worst heartaches and disappointments and the wounds that we experience and turn it for something good. And as much as it's miserable while it's happening, which it was, in retrospect, I've seen such wonderful change in my own life as a result of this.
Yeah.
Without seeing vindication yet, without seeing anything, because the big problem, Donald, is that once I entered the federal court system, we are dealing with an institution, the Smithsonian Institution, that is like the Sacred Heart of Washington, D.C. I have the documentation in my book right from the beginning, from the founding. I did the historic research I did, remarkable. But I have a speech written by the Assistant Secretary to the Smithsonian Institution for Chief Justice Warren Burger, that when it was the Warren Court. And it was a speech about the Smithsonian in which it says clearly that the courts themselves do not know what the Smithsonian Institution is. The confusion, and that's what the whole premise of my book is, other than all these different layers that it deals with, from being a very funny book, you'll laugh as you read it, you'll cry, you'll throw it around the room with madness and anger and frustration. There's so many levels to the book. At the core of it is legal. This is what's amazing about it when I say it's my destiny. See, I didn't know anything, Donald. I knew nothing. So I'm just studying. And in the studying, I discover this huge problem in the legal constitution, it's not the legal constitution, sorry, in the legal interpretation of what the Smithsonian is today and what it was when it's founded, how it's drifted, and what I discovered was like, oh my goodness, hold on a second. This like huge aha moment. But then I began to encounter it in the federal courts themselves. The federal courts, there's so few lawsuits against the Smithsonian. No lawsuit, free speech like mine against the Smithsonian. No, my case is the only case that has gone to the Supreme Court, even though they rejected it. It's there now for the third time. And the reason is because it's like the Sacred Heart of Washington, D.C. And it has been allowed to decay in its legal constitution so that people can basically do what they want with it. So my lawsuit has come and is pointing a finger because of what happened to me. And the question before the U.S. Supreme Court now, and it remains unanswered, and this is an unanswered question of federal law, and it is, what is the legal entity status of the Smithsonian Institution? In other words, is it just a private charity? Is it a federal agency?
Yeah.
But the problem is that when you look at the rulings in my court that I appealed, I went through the district court, I went to the Circuit Court of Appeals. There's a 3-judge panel. Then when you appeal it from the 3-judge panel, you go to a 16-judge panel in the Circuit Court, 16 judges, and they all kicked it to the curb. And then from there, you go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the 9 justices, I have it in writing, Justice John Roberts, because he's the chancellor of the Smithsonian and a defendant in my case. I was suing him like everyone else, saying, I sent you an appeal, and you handed it over to this guy who then kicked me to the curb and stood by all these. There was no adjudication of a lawful appeal. You didn't adjudicate my appeal. That guy said, I got your letter and I agreed to everything Kim Sayet said and did. Goodbye. He didn't read my appeal. He didn't adjudicate. It was just it was a layer upon layer of legal criminality that the responsible parties were those people who I appealed to, which was regents, the Chief Justice. So imagine the lawsuit arrives in the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice John Roberts is on the lawsuit as a defendant. So he recuses himself, and it's in writing when they did the consideration. But the other 9 justices are like, we're not going to deal with this hot potato. Yeah. We're not, because you can imagine if they said, oh yeah, we're going to deal with this now. So that's the big issue of the book, the story, the most important thing for your listeners.
Yeah.
My story for me is life-changing. It can be a very rewarding read. very educational, a lot to learn, a lot of stuff, the scandals in the Smithsonian, the wonderful rich history of the Smithsonian. There's so much there. And then the legal story, the journey, the book is layered with different layers. And then the personal struggles and overcoming the obstacles and the hardships and the disappointments. So it's for that reason. But at the end of it, as I look at it as an American who swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, the biggest heartache for me is then coming up against people who may have even sworn that oath as well, but don't even take it seriously. And then you have to answer. I think, the difference with an immigrant. You have, because of your service, you had to swear. But Americans who grow up and they go to school and they don't do it, they don't. They just blah, 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 blah. And so I swore this oath. I stood there and raised my hand, and they actually called me up to lead this entire room of hundreds of people becoming citizens, to lead them in the pledge. I had to go and do this thing. And, it was a big deal. I mean, tears, and this is amazing experience. And then I get these people, these hijackers, who then say, well, you know what? You don't have any rights. This Smithsonian is so important that we are going to just side with them. And you, Mr. Raven, your free speech rights, we don't really care about right now because you're just a nothing, nobody. Yeah. But I'm the type of nobody that says, well, that may be true, but I am not going to stop until I have my day in court. And that is my journey, and that is why I continue. Now, the greatest thing happened to me, and that's a summation of then many years and disappointments. But what happened then just last month? I don't know if you read that part of my story, Donald. Did you read it?
I don't think so.
Well, the president fired Kim Sayed. He fired the National Portrait Gallery director, and he fired her, but he didn't have the authority to fire her. But in spirit, he did. Then the Board of Regents got together, had their big meeting. They came out and said, "We are in charge of firing our employees. Mr. President, you have no authority here." And then a few days later, she resigned, which I knew they forced her to resign.
Yeah.
They wouldn't fire her. They would call her to resign.
Yep.
But the president's list of 17 reasons to fire her, my case is number 4 in the White House. So it's there in paper, black and white. Julian Raven's rejection of his painting, Unafraid and Unashamed. And it's the core reason. They made these other things up that she did in that. But no, because I was interviewed in my journey by, for example, Ed Martin. Ed Martin is one of the Department of Justice's now headhunters, whose job is to basically go around and dig out all these reprobates in the federal government. And I was on his show 2 years ago, and I went through the whole story, and he had my book and the whole story of Kim Sayed and all this. And Trump comes out and says, a lot of people have told me this woman's a really partisan woman. And I'm like, yeah, you're too right. All these people that I've been telling and banging my drum for 8 years, and now you finally are dealing, because he could have done that the first time.
Yeah.
But the thing with the Smithsonian, Donald, that it is so protected because of the prestige. There's so much prestige attached to it. Nobody, I sue them and I'm a bad guy. I'm a victim trying to redress my rights, but I get treated like I'm the bad guy. And I'm like, well, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I sent in an application, get a phone call, and this is how I get treated. And what I'm doing is doing what this law says that I should do. And I get treated, so passing that all by. But the book is a huge blessing to the soul, as far as what it does and what we do as people, as me as a Christian man, as a citizen of the United States, the civic duty, the responsibility to be part of this dialogue, to stand on something and not to back down until we see it straight. It's crooked right now. It's got to be straight. And I believe, by the grace of God, that what happened last month has been huge for me. It's one of the reasons why I've now reactivated my whole case, because I've gone through years where I'm just going to let this go. There's nothing more I can be doing. My lawsuits, the last lawsuit was at the beginning of this year. That's a whole other story, whole other bunch of baloney. The type of person that I am is, you're the outsider. You're the fringe character. You're this guy over there doing this. And, history is full of those stories where you have people who just say, well, this is the right thing to do, and I'm not going to be wavered until I see it straight. Yeah. And then things change. And so I have great confidence, Donald, that God is in this story, and that I am going to see, by the grace of God. I mean, if you look at the Washington Post stories that came out, a lot of very good stories came out from them. Only the Washington Post, they had me interviewed twice. They were the only people who asked the questions that my story provokes. All the other media on the right and the left, they were just like, we're just going to run with Kim Sayet, the director of the Portrait Gallery, the left-wing media. Oh, poor Kim Sayet, mean President Trump, kicking, like she didn't do anything. Where a federal judge, in my case, Donald, with Judge Trevor McFadden, when he ruled in my case, the most bizarre ruling, again, the status quo bias even controlling his ruling, because this is how complex and convoluted it is. When he ruled, he said Kim Sayet's actions were odious. The title of my book, Odious and Cerberus. He called the Smithsonian Institution Cerberus, which is the mythical three-headed hellhound guarding the gates of hell in Greek mythology. He called them because all three branches of government sit at the board of the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
And the complex issue, it's not even complex, he just made it complex. After everything, in order for him to deny me First Amendment free speech rights, they had to say that the Smithsonian Institution is the government through and through. It's absolutely the government. When the truth is, it has nothing to do with the government, meaning it is a private charity. The government is the trustee of the private charity. That's it. They have no more impact or should have no more impact or influence. So Judge McFadden comes out, says, say it. She was partisan and she was odious, but what she did was perfectly legal. And you're like, what? Because it's the government, and this is government speech. Her decision to kick you to the curb was government speech, and you don't have free speech rights here. And you're like, you got to be kidding me. Because then this is 2 weeks ago now, Donald, Lonnie Bunch III, who is the director of the Smithsonian, he's the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. When they were trying to rebuff the president, he came out with an official statement saying the Smithsonian Institution is an independent entity. We're independent. So you're an independent entity here. The federal court saying it's the government here. Mr. Raven, you have no free speech rights. And my appeal now, emergency petition to the Supreme Court is you are under obligation to say, A, could the president fire her? B, what is the nature of the Smithsonian Institution so that everybody in America knows what our rights are when we walk into that institution that belongs to the American people. It is ours. We should know the rights that we have when we walk through those doors. That is my story.
I commend you because, man, you are making some people nervous, and that is a good thing. I just keep having this one thought that goes through my mind listening to this story, and I'm probably going to get some grief for saying it, but I wonder if Biden's son, if he gave his finger paintings to the Smithsonian, if they would have accepted those.
Well, the portrait, the Smithsonian has different art galleries. It has an American art gallery. It has the portrait gallery. So it has different places where a painting like that could be totally valid. See, this is the thing about the will of James Smith. The Smithsonian is a trust. It's a private trust. And the only governing principle that should govern that trust is the will of James Smithson, not the will of Donald Trump, not the will of the President of the United States, because when those members of the government sit down at the Board of Regents to have their meetings, they are sitting down as citizens of America. They leave and I write about this in detail in the book, they leave their robes at the door. They do not sit there as a government, because guess what, Donald? If you have the Chief Justice of the Judiciary and the Vice President of the Executive, and 3 members of Congress, and 3 members of the Senate sitting at the same table, making a decision together as one body, you know what that's called? That's the violation of power, of the separation of powers.
Yeah.
We have a doctrine that separates the 3 branches of government. This is the only place where a federal judge has said, this is where the government sits all together, shoulder to shoulder, and makes decisions as one. It's so wrong. Yeah. It's so convoluted, because the Smithsonian Institution is simply a private trust. It's a charity. It's like a church. Yeah. If you're part of a church and you're on the board, or you're on the board of trustees, you just go there and you just take care of the church and its vision. The Smithsonian is controlled by the will of, and his will says he wanted an institution in Washington, D.C. He's giving all of his fortune for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men. That's his will. That's it. He doesn't say what it can be.
Yeah.
He says it's the increase of knowledge. So if your contribution brings an increase of knowledge to that institution, it's valid. That's why her rejection of me was, you're rejecting all of this knowledge, a story, violating the will of James. These are breaches of trust, fiduciary duty that she trampled on. And so when you talk about someone like Hunter Biden, he could very well in another museum have a painting qualify, because it's not, and this is what people so misunderstand about the portrait gallery. In the portrait gallery, it's not how good the painting is. It says it in black and white. This is where she was so wrong again. It says the portrait gallery is not about how good the painting is or how famous the artist is. It's about the historicity of the subject. It's about how important the person is who affected American history and culture. So if you look at the record of Trump's portraits in the Smithsonian, there's a sketch in there, looked like it was done on a napkin, of Trump as Icarus with his wings made of dollar bills catching fire when Donald Trump had one of his big economic collapses. And that's in the Smithsonian Portrait Gallery as a portrait of Trump at that time in the cultural, you know what I'm saying? It's a sketch with a pen on a napkin. It has no artistic merit other than it depicts a time in this important person's life in American culture and history. That's it. So you can't reject the painting because whether it's good or so you might not like Hunter Biden's son's paintings. But if that painting was part of the story of this man and it told his story, this is this son who has been doing all of this stuff and this whole laptop saga and that whole story is told, and there's the painting, it's an increase of knowledge. You know, it's like it's not there because it qualifies as great art. It's there because it's telling a story of this one person. And then the job of the curators is to decide whether they want to tell that story. They have liberty to do that. But if they're going to then say, we're going to deprive the American people of this story because we don't like what Hunter Biden stands for, that's not, there's no provision for that. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So his story, as awful as it is equally valid. It's an American story. Let it be told, because it's a warning for all the smut that went with it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's a lot about the Smithsonian. Most people, that's why, people that hate my painting, they're like, it's no good. It's this. And I'm like saying, it has nothing to do with whether it's good or not. It has nothing to do with it. I painted a painting in the fire of one of the most consequential political stories in American history. And I captured the zeitgeist of that moment. The only one to do it, the first one to do it, the biggest one to do it, the biggest painting representing this man and all this big gilded frame is totally Trumpian. It represents everything American, our values, the people that are crying out for our Constitution, the faded constitutions on there, you name it. There's all this. It tells our story from a political perspective, but they cannot stand at this. That's where they have to be reformed. That's where this whole process that started last month, I believe, is going to unravel this whole institution and bring it to order, make it straight, tell stories from both sides, tell American stories, but be fair and do it fairly. That's all we need to do.
Well, I'm going to tell you, when this episode airs and everybody sees your painting, I honestly care less who you would have made it of. There is no way you can call it bad. It is an amazing painting. I don't care whether.
Well, and again, you're only seeing. You see, what I don't like about the images online about it is the painting is so big that when it's compressed, it gets worse. And listen, you look at it, you see what it's like. It's this, but when you see it, it's an experience. I've had people stand in front of it and they're like, I have goosebumps like this, and they're rubbing their arms, this. So it's for people who hold those values. Yeah. It's for Americans. But this is the poison that is in that museum that this woman was part of, that they're like, this is what we don't want American flags. We don't want this. We don't want this. And you're like, you people are they're venomous. They want to control. And I was like, you want to be like that? Good. Go work in the private sector, bring a museum, stick your own work, whatever. That's America. That's freedom. But don't you dare do it. In this instance, don't you dare do it. And you know what? One of the biggest heartaches for me was Donald. She deprived so many people of seeing this work of art at that time of just tremendous celebration and all this conflicted, but this moment for people with a certain set of political beliefs to be like, wow, that's really the power of art is that in one image, you can tell the whole story, in one image, not a video. That's the power of, the picture says 1,000 words. The image is so powerful. And that's why it was rejected. They could not accept anything that would tell the story in any way that they could not control or denigrate. They had to, that's, but the heartache is like, and it's gone on because I've gone through all these different seasons with it. And I hope one day, and the Washington Post journalist, Maura Judkis, when you read those articles, she was very unusual because I've had so much bias against me, so much mockery and ridicule. She was the only person in the Washington Post who's got national coverage, a very good article. She was really objective, really, really neutral. It was really surprising. But she asked all those questions and basically says, is this the time now that they're going to see this painting? Is this the time that the Smithsonian will finally accept this painting? And who knows? You never know. God is up to all sorts of tricks.
Yeah.
You never know, Donald.
Absolutely. Hey, if you order your book from your website, is it
Amazon? Yeah. My website you can go to too. Yeah. It'll take you to Amazon.
Okay.
You can buy it in all major book dealers. It's all any you can buy it anywhere. Yep.
I was just curious how to get a signed copy. Is it possible to get an autographed copy?
You'd have to. I listen. What I'm doing right now, I'm working on it in the last few days. So I'm putting out the second edition right now because it has all the story at the prologue of what just happened. I wrote about Kim Sayat's departure in the book from 2 years ago. It's all in the story. I wrote about speculating when she'd leave and blah, blah, blah. So now she's gone. So it's the front cover is, Kim Sayat resigns. It's like a big, fly. It's the second edition. So it's great. It's like, this is epic for me. The book is like, this is like perfect. I'm going to go. And I just put out a press release, July 1st. I'm going to be on the steps of the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. I'm going to have a press conference and a book signing with the new version of the book, Kim Sayat Resigns, because she's no longer there. It's going to be great, man. It's going to be absolutely epic right there, right on the front, right on the street. Have all my books, do my little thing. That's going to be a marvelous thing. But yeah, the best way to get it is either wait for that to come out, which is going to be soon, or you have to buy the copy and have them ship it to me. And then I ship it back to you because I don't have any copies right now because I'm about to get new copies with the updated content and the new cover, which has Kim Sayat Resigns. It's so great, man. It's like she's in the book from the first page. She's the antagonist of the story. And it's right there. And so it's a huge deal. It's for me, I'm a little guy. I'm like, this is good. This is really, really good. Yeah. And you never know. I mean, vindication may come. Compensation may come. I've had a lot of heartache because of this, and it may come. And who knows? We don't know that. The good Lord can do all sorts of wonderful things in our lives unsuspectingly. And when we least, like I said, suspect us, we're just like, wow, that's amazing. So that would be the way. If you do want a signed copy, you either wait or you get it sent to me because my address is on the website. Okay. And you can email me as well from the website. You can go to julianraven.com, which is my art website. It's separate from this story. Then this story is under the website Smithsonian Institution. I snatched the name. James Smithson is the founder of the Smithsonian. So they've got Smithsonian. I got Smithson. Smith is like Smith's son. Smithsonian Institution is the website where I am standing up to vindicate the last will and testament of Mr. James Smithson, an Englishman just like me.
That is awesome. Julian, we're getting up to the time here. I think we'll end it, but would you mind after this kind of plays out, I'd love to have you come back on again and kind of update everybody, how 2025 goes for you, because
I would love to, and I'm not sure it would be after the next large effort. That could be. I am dangling on, and because of my disappointments, I learned to put my expectations really low, especially with the Supreme Court. They've had 3 petitions from me now, and I've petitioned them again. Now, this petition is because the President of the United States fired the woman who is the protagonist in my book and also the reason for the court case that they rejected.
Yeah.
And then the Smithsonian secretary came out saying, we're a private, independent entity, basically.
Yep.
That's his statement. But the judge said the Smithsonian's the government through and through. And the question to the Supreme Court is, well, which is it? It can't be both. It's impossible. It cannot be both. So they are the ones who have to say, it's this, Mr. Raven. And if this is right, then Mr. Raven, you were right all along, which I believe will happen, God willing, hopefully in my lifetime.
Well, I hope so. We're going to go ahead and throw the exit video out. And if you don't mind staying on for just a second, I'll be right with you.
Well, thanks for having me on, though.
No problem, man. I learned a lot today, and it was very interesting. So I appreciate it.
Very well.